I've been working for 35 years now, studying and trying to figure out what employers think about this subject of employment and disability. For the first 20 years or so, I came to the conclusion that most of what I was reading was not very usable, or what I call not actionable. Most of these studies were done by social psychologists, and they tend to be studies of attitudes, including employer attitudes. The problem with researching something like attitudes is it's very difficult to tell when your subject is being completely honest in their responses or giving you what they feel is a socially desirable response that you want to hear. But the other problem when you study attitudes is particular to doing attitude studies with people with disabilities. It's a phenomenon that social psychologists call distressed identification. If you think about the term disability or people with disability, you can't do so without being aware at some level that disability is something that could happen to you, and happen to you on a moment's notice. That causes us distress. If you're working age, male or female, there's a good chance you probably live to be about 85 years old. By that time, there's an 85% probability that you will incur a chronic illness or a severely disabling condition. In any other matter of equal employment opportunity, you don't have the same issue. After all, you can't do anything as an employee to change on a moment's notice your age, or your gender, or your race, or your ethnic status, or your sexual orientation, but your health status? That's really not within your control entirely. Stressed identification, it's a big thing in ADA because it helps us understand and explain all the research findings about attitude. When you study people with disabilities, very few people really like them a lot. Very few people really dislike them a lot. But the middle group, which includes about 95% of us, you and me, didn't like or dislike disabled people. It's something we just don't want to think about because of distressed identification. We'd rather not think about it. But it really messes up the research on attitudes and disability, and so I don't study attitudes anymore. And about 10 years ago, I redirected my research interest, and I changed my focus rather to the study of behavioral manifestations of attitudes, and of negative attitudes in particular. To the study of things like hate crimes against people with disabilities, or workplace discrimination against people with disability. Personally, I don't care what your attitudes are about people towards disabilities. I do care very much about the behaviors and about how you treat them. The facts, I like facts. But facts are really just stubborn things sometimes. You don't like the things you learn. But I want to promise you, if you stick with me to the end of this film, I'm going to give you the straight story about employment and disability, because I think if and when you understand it, you can do some things with it. Not only to improve the employment prospects for people with disabilities and your relationship with them, more important, I think there are big business advantages for you to understand these facts and maybe alter some of our employment behaviors. I think by now you might be asking, well, where does McMahon get these facts? Okay, I'll tell you what my primary sources are. The first of these primary sources is a survey done by the Department of Labor intended to assess your attitudes and behaviors. Now, this study, it has everything you want in a well-designed survey. It's current, has a large sample, stratified by company size and industry, has a great response rate. It's very representative of our 2.5 million American employers, including you. Take a look at these findings regarding employers. First, as employers, do we hire people with disabilities? Yes. About 19.1% of U.S. companies hire people with disabilities. Hey, that sounds pretty good, about 500,000 employers. You know, the size of your company makes a big difference. If you're a big company, the number's about 53%. Medium-sized company, about 23%. A small company, about 11%. The second major finding is this. Do we recruit people with disabilities? Yes, again. About 13.6% of U.S. companies actively recruit people with disabilities. This happens more so in the public sector than in the private sector. And in the private sector, it happens more so in service and in goods-producing industries. How do you feel about those numbers? Can you explain them? Are you okay with them? Let's look at it from a slightly different perspective. I want you to imagine that this morning you picked up the Wall Street Journal and this was the headline. I think that would be a national disgrace. In fact, I'm absolutely sure that American business would not be able to function in any way, because in reality, we know 51% of American workers today are female, and a third are from minority group members, and 19% are from workers over the age of 55. Why are these numbers of 19% and 14% okay when it comes to people with disabilities? And how do we explain that? And can't we do better?